The cursor blinked on my screen at 2:47 a.m., and suddenly I couldn't feel my fingers on the keyboard. 3 words buried in a 20-year-old site report had just stopped my heart. Approved cost reduction. W. Harrington. I'd been searching through digitized mining records for 6 months, convinced the mine collapse that killed my parents wasn't an accident. But seeing his actual signature on the document that condemned them, that made my coffee taste like copper in my mouth. Outside my apartment window, Denver glowed in the winter dark. Inside, the heating unit clicked on. But I'd gone cold hours ago. My sister Riley's engagement announcement sat pinned to my corkboard, her smile radiant next to her fiancé Derek. Derek Harrington, the son of the man whose name I was staring at on my screen. My name is Clorinda, I'm 38 and I'm a civil engineer. This is the story of how I rebuilt what was never supposed to fall. I printed the document with shaking hands. The date stared back at me. November 3rd, 2005, 2 weeks before the Rocky Ridge mine caved in, crushing my parents under a mountain of compromised steel and broken promises. The report detailed cost-cutting measures, skipping reinforcement installations, using substandard materials, rushing timelines, all to save Harrington Mining $3.2 million, 20 years. I'd spent 20 years raising Riley on ramen and hope, working double shifts to put her through art school, telling her our parents died in a tragic accident. Because that's what the newspapers said, what the company lawyers said, what everyone said until the words became truth through repetition. But the paper in my hands told a different story. I was 17 when it happened. I remember standing behind the fence at the mine site, my hands frozen to the chain link metal, watching ambulances scream into the November night. A foreman had shouted that the roof gave in, that the support beams weren't reinforced. But by morning, the headline read, "Natural seismic event causes mining tragedy." I'd believed it. We'd all believed it. The next day, I walked into the Harrington Mining office with that newspaper article folded in my coat. A man behind the reception desk barely looked up. "Company paid out fair compensation," he said, already dismissing me. "Best thing you can do is move forward." I was too young then to know what questions to ask, too broken to push back. But I took something with me that day, a safety report left carelessly on the counter. One line had caught my eye even then. Pending structural review, WH, I'd kept it all these years. Now, 20 years later, with an engineering degree and access to federal mining databases, I finally understood what I'd been looking at. That pending review had never been completed. The structural work had never been done. My parents died 2 weeks after Walter Harrington signed off on skipping the reinforcements. My phone buzzed, a text from Riley. "Dinner at Derek's parents tomorrow? His dad wants to meet you properly. Please say yes." I stared at the message for a long moment, then at Walter's signature on my screen. The mountain ridge visible through my window was the same one that had swallowed my parents whole. "I'll be there," I texted back. Looking back now, that moment feels like the real beginning of everything, though the investigation itself had started 3 months earlier. 3 months earlier. The investigation had started innocently enough. I'd been reviewing structural failure patterns for a safety seminar when I noticed something odd about the Rocky Ridge collapse. The geological survey from 2005 showed no seismic activity that week. None. But the official report had blamed the cave-in on a minor earthquake. I'd requested the original engineering assessments through a Freedom of Information Act filing. When they arrived, heavily redacted, I knew someone had something to hide. That's when I contacted Marcus Bennett, an investigative journalist who'd covered mining safety violations for the Denver Post. We met at a coffee shop downtown, and I spread the documents across the table between us. "My parents died in this mine," I told him, "and I think someone lied about why." Marcus studied the papers, his expression darkening. "If you're right about this, we're talking about criminal negligence at minimum, maybe manslaughter." "Can you help me prove it?" He looked at me for a long moment. "I can try, but you need to understand. Going after someone like Walter Harrington means he'll come after you, too." "Let him." That meeting set everything in motion. By the time I walked into the Harrington estate months later, I already knew what I was facing. Present day, the Harrington estate. The house was everything mine had never been. Soaring glass walls, mountain views that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Art that probably had its own insurance policy. Walter Harrington stood at the center of it all, a gold watch catching the chandelier light as he extended his hand. "The civil engineer," he said warmly. "Derek speaks highly of you, says you're brilliant with structural analysis." His grip was firm, confident, the grip of a man who'd never faced real consequences. "I analyze what keeps things standing," I said, meeting his eyes, "and what makes them fall." Something flickered across his face, too quick to read, before his smile returned. "Practical woman. I like that. Riley's lucky to have you." We moved into the dining room, where Riley beamed beside Derek at a table that could seat 12. The walls held family photos. Walter at ribbon cuttings, Walter shaking hands with governors, Walter standing proudly in front of mining sites. One photo stopped me cold. Walter at Rocky Ridge, dated 2004, 1 year before the collapse. In the background, I could see the main entrance, the support structure, the mountain face that would become my parents' grave. "That was one of our most successful sites," Walter said, noticing my stare. "Terrible what happened there, of course. The earthquake destroyed years of good work." "There was no earthquake," I said quietly. The table went silent. Riley's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Derek glanced between his father and me, confused. "I'm sorry?" Walter's voice remained pleasant, but his eyes had gone sharp. "The geological survey from that week shows 0 seismic activity. I pulled the records." "Clara," Riley said nervously, "can we not—" "Why would an engineer pull 20-year-old geological surveys?" Walter interrupted, his tone still friendly, but with an edge now. "Because I'm thorough, and because my parents died when that mine collapsed." I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes, the quick math of risk and exposure. Then his expression shifted to practice sympathy. "My God, I had no idea. You must understand, we did everything by the book. That tragedy devastated our entire company. The investigation cleared us completely." "Investigations can miss things," I said, "or find only what they're shown." Riley stood abruptly. "I need some air." Derek followed her out onto the terrace, leaving Walter and me alone at opposite ends of the table. He set down his wine glass with deliberate care. "You seem like a smart woman, Clorinda. Smart enough to know that dragging up painful history won't bring your parents back. My son loves your sister. Don't let old grief poison their future." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice, from someone who's seen what happens when people can't let go." He stood, smoothing his jacket. "Riley deserves happiness. I hope you won't stand in the way of that." After he left, I sat alone in that enormous dining room, surrounded by photos of a man who'd built his empire on skipped inspections and cut corners, on my parents' bodies. My phone buzzed. "Marcus. Found something. Call me." I called him immediately, and within the hour, I was back at my apartment waiting for him to arrive. 2 weeks before the wedding. When Marcus arrived at my place that evening, he spread printouts across my kitchen table with shaking hands. "Holy shit," he said. "Clara, this is bigger than we thought." The documents showed a pattern spanning 15 years, cost reductions at 7 different Harrington mining sites, each one approved by Walter personally, each one cutting corners on safety reinforcements. Rocky Ridge was just the most visible failure, the one that had actually collapsed. "How did you get these?" I asked. A former Harrington executive reached out after seeing my initial inquiries. He's been sitting on this for years, too afraid to come forward. But he's willing to talk now, especially after I showed him what we already had. "What's he afraid of?" Marcus looked at me seriously. "Walter Harrington doesn't just run a mining company, Clara. He's connected politically, financially, legally. People who've challenged him before have found their lives suddenly very complicated. Lost jobs, audits, reputations destroyed. Then we make sure he can't touch us before he knows we're coming." I pulled up my laptop and started cross-referencing the documents with public financial records. Within an hour, I'd found it. $3.2 million transferred from Harrington Mining's Environmental Safety Fund to an offshore account in the Bahamas, dated 2 weeks after the Rocky Ridge collapse. Blood money, insurance payout from my parents' deaths, laundered and hidden. "We need to take this to the SEC," Marcus said. Not yet. I was already working through the timeline in my head, calculating angles and pressure points. If we go to the SEC now, Walter has time to hide evidence, intimidate witnesses, tie this up in legal proceedings for years. We need to make this public first, so visible he can't make it disappear. You have something in mind? I looked at Riley's wedding invitation on my fridge, her handwriting looping across the elegant cardstock. The ceremony was in 2 weeks, with 200 guests and live streaming for family who couldn't attend. He wants to celebrate his son's wedding in front of everyone who matters to him, I said slowly. So let's give him an audience. 1 week before the wedding. A week later, Derek showed up at my apartment at 11 p.m., looking wrecked. Riley must have given him my address. They'd been here for dinner once, months ago, back when everything was simpler. "I need to know if what my father said is true," Derek said the moment I opened the door. "What did he say?" "That you're investigating him. That you're trying to destroy our family because of some conspiracy theory about an old mining accident." Derek's voice cracked. "Riley's in tears. She thinks you hate her for being happy." I let him inside, poured us both coffee, and spread the documents across my table. Every signature, every transfer, every compromise safety report. I watched his face as he read, watched the man he thought his father was crumble into the man his father actually was. "Oh God," he whispered, staring at the Rocky Ridge report. "He killed them. Your parents. He looked up at me, devastated. "Riley, she doesn't know." "No one knows yet, but they will." "When?" "At your wedding." "I'm sorry, Derek. I know that's your day, but it's the only time I can guarantee Walter won't see it coming. The only moment he'll be too exposed to run." Derek was quiet for a long time. Then, "What do you need me to do?" The wedding day. The venue was absurdly beautiful. A glass-walled ballroom in Aspen with the Rockies towering beyond the windows. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing everything in white. It should have felt pure, pristine. Instead, it felt like a burial. I sat at the back table in a silver dress, watching guests arrive in their designer suits and elegant gowns. Riley looked radiant in white lace, her happiness so genuine it made my chest ache. She texted me that morning. "I know things have been weird, but I love you. Thank you for being here." I hadn't answered. At 1:30 p.m., Marcus texted, "Files uploaded to secure server. Press release ready. Just need your signal." Walter stood at the head table, all charm and authority in his tailored tuxedo. When he tapped his glass for attention, the room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice warm and paternal. "Today we celebrate not just the union of Derek and Riley, but the joining of 2 families. Riley, my dear, you've brought such joy to our lives. Coming from difficult circumstances as you did, losing your parents so young, being raised in such instability, you've shown remarkable resilience." Riley's smile faltered slightly. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. "That kind of strength is rare," Walter continued, oblivious or uncaring. "And I'm proud that Derek can offer you the stability and security you deserve, something your sister, despite her best efforts, could never quite provide." The room went very quiet. I stood slowly, every eye turning toward me. "Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "since you brought up stability and security, let's talk about foundations, specifically the ones you cut corners on." His face went still. "This is hardly the time." 20 years ago, you signed off on cost reductions at the Rocky Ridge mine. You personally approved skipping structural reinforcements to save money. 2 weeks later, that mine collapsed, killing 17 people, including my parents. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Riley stood, her face white. "Clara, what are you—" You saved $3.2 million on safety measures, I continued, walking toward the head table, then transferred that exact amount to an offshore account after the insurance payout. You built your empire on their bodies, Walter. You stood in this room and called my childhood unstable, but you're the one who destroyed it. Walter's phone buzzed, then Derek's, then dozens of phones throughout the room, a cascade of notifications. Marcus had sent the press release. The documents were live. You have no proof, Walter said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I have your signature on every document. I have financial records. I have testimony from your former executives. I was standing directly in front of him now, and as of 30 seconds ago, so does the FBI, the SEC, and every major news outlet in the country. The room erupted, guests checking their phones, reporters in the back scrambling for their cameras. Riley was sobbing, Derek holding her, and Walter. Walter just stood there, watching his world collapse in real time. You used my sister's wedding as your stage, he said quietly, dangerously. You used my parents' deaths as your profit margin. At least I had the decency to give you an audience. Security arrived within minutes. Not venue security, but federal agents. I watched them read Walter his rights, watched them lead him out in handcuffs past 200 witnesses. The wedding photographer's camera clicked continuously, capturing every moment. The ballroom emptied quickly after that, guests streaming out in shocked silence. There was no ceremony, no celebration, just the hollow echo of what should have been. Riley wouldn't look at me as I left. I didn't blame her. 8 months later. The trial had taken most of the year, but once the documents went public, the outcome was never in doubt. Walter's lawyers tried every delay tactic, but with the evidence so clear and the media attention so intense, prosecutors pushed for the maximum sentence. He was convicted of 17 counts of criminally negligent homicide, fraud, and money laundering. 40 years minimum. He'd die in prison. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. Riley hadn't spoken to me since the wedding. Derek had tried to mediate, but she'd been clear. What I'd done was unforgivable. I destroyed her wedding day, humiliated her husband's family, and built my revenge on her happiness. She wasn't wrong. I was boxing up files in my apartment. The investigation was over. The documents could finally be archived. When someone knocked, Riley stood in the hallway looking exhausted. Can I come in? We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Derek showed me everything. All the documents, all the proof. I read the full report about what happened to Mom and Dad. Riley, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. I was so angry at you. I thought you were obsessed, that you'd let grief turn you cruel. But you were right, about all of it. And her voice broke. I was going to marry into that family. I was going to let that man give me away at my wedding. The man who killed our parents. You didn't know. But you did. And you carried that alone for months while I called you vindictive and crazy. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. You didn't destroy my wedding, Clara. You saved me from building my life on a foundation of lies. That's what Mom and Dad would have wanted. I couldn't speak. After 20 years of silence, after months of investigation, after everything, this was the moment I finally broke. We held each other while we both cried, two sisters who'd lost too much but had somehow found each other again. Derek and I got married last month, she said quietly, pulling back to wipe her eyes. At the courthouse, just the two of us and a witness. It felt right, starting fresh without all the spectacle. He hasn't spoken to his father since the arrest and doesn't plan to. We're building something new together, something that isn't tainted by Walter's legacy. 1 year later, when the anniversary of that interrupted wedding arrived, I found myself at the Rocky Ridge site. The location had been transformed. Where the mine entrance once stood, there was now a memorial garden. 17 names carved in stone, including Sarah and James Peaton, my parents. The Peaton Memorial Trust, funded by the recovered money from Walter's offshore accounts, had commissioned it. I visited every month, usually alone. But today, Riley and Derek came with me. We'd grown closer in the past year, healing slowly. Riley had finished her art therapy degree and now worked with families who'd lost loved ones in industrial accidents. Derek had sold his shares in Harrington Mining and started a nonprofit focused on mining safety advocacy. We'd all found ways to rebuild. "I'm pregnant," Riley said quietly as we stood before the memorial. "We found out yesterday." "Riley, that's wonderful." "We're naming her Clara, after you." She took my hand. "I want her to know what it means to stand up for what's right, even when it costs everything. I want her to know her aunt was brave enough to tear down an empire built on lies." I looked at my parents' names, carved in stone that would outlast all of us. The mountain breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, new growth in a place that had known only darkness. "They would have loved that," I said. As we walked back to the car, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the valley. The memorial garden would bloom again next spring, and the spring after that, and every spring for years to come. A foundation built on truth, not buried under lies. They called it revenge. I called it reconstruction. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.